internet service in Jamaica.
You better believe it.
To comment during the Frankly Speaking show, you first need to open the video that is being streamed live. Look for the chat box on the side or bottom of the video player. This is where you can type your message. Click inside the chat box and use your keyboard to type out what you want to say. You can type words, use emojis, or even ask questions. Once you've typed your message, press the enter key on your keyboard or click the send button.
Good day. Good day. Frankly speaking, mental illness is no joke. It's widely acknowledged that in Jamaica, we don't treat it with seriousness it deserves, with the seriousness it deserves, frankly speaking. From time to time, we talk about mental health because of the circumstances of a suicide or two. In the last few days, 2 children committed suicide, and so too did a former beauty contestant. We are hearing about more bullying in schools, cyberbullying too, children in schools having difficulties coping with life, fitting in. Guidance counselors are supposed to be part of the safety net. How are they managing? We have with us the president of the Association of Guidance Counselors in Schools, Leighton Campbell. But before him, we'll talk with president of the Jamaica Psychiatric Association, Dr. Brian Kazaara, to explore aspects of mental health. This is, frankly speaking, number 184 edition. With me today are regular panelists Desmond Richards and Winnie Anderson Brown. Thanks to you, our viewers, for joining us. We welcome your comments and questions during the show. Please follow the procedures outlined at the top of the podcast, or just place your questions or comments in the comment section on the YouTube channel. We'll respond where possible. If you have not done so yet, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends. You can watch the recorded version at your leisure on the Frankly Speaking Jamaica YouTube channel. Now, let's talk mental health or mental wellness. Welcome, Dr. Kazaara. Welcome. Are you hearing me? Dr. Kazaara? All right, so we have Dr. Brian Kazaara, president of the Jamaica Psychiatric Association. Dr. Kazaara, can you define for us, please, what's crucial for the average person to understand about mental illness?
All right, well, once again, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be speaking on a forum like this about such important topics. Before we go into mental illness, I do want to take this time to talk about what mental health is, because they're not the same thing. A lot of times when we talk about mental health, we immediately start thinking about mental illness, but they're not exactly the same. So the World Health Organization defines mental health as a state of well-being where individuals are able to realize their potential, they can cope with the normal stresses of life, and they can contribute to their community. So I really want to emphasize those 3 things. So first, it's a state of well-being, meaning that you feel all right in yourself, you feel content, you're satisfied with life. The second point I want to make is that people with good mental health are able to achieve their full potential. That's a big one as well. They're able to cope with the normal stresses of life. I always emphasize to my patients that no matter who you are, there are going to be some stressful situations. You are going to have to deal with the stresses of life. However, someone with good mental health knows how to do it and knows how to do it in a healthy way, how to cope with stressors. And then finally, they should be able to contribute to their community. We consider mental health, someone with good mental health, as someone who is able to contribute to their families, to their surrounding communities, and to different institutions in society. All right, so once we establish that that is what mental health is, then we can talk about mental illness. So mental illness as one would imagine, is a situation where all the things we mentioned that are part of mental health are compromised. And when we speak about mental illness, there are usually three major areas we like to talk about: your thoughts, your feelings, and your behavior. So if you really consider any type of mental illness, name any mental illness, it's going to have some kind of
Sorry, doctor, can you
deficit
just
in.
go over those? Can you just repeat the three of them for me again?
Not a problem at all, Mr. McKnight. So what I was saying was, if we look at any mental illness, those three domains are the ones that will be affected. And those are your thoughts, your feelings, and your behavior. In many cases, all three of them might be affected, or in some cases, it may just be one. So, for instance, a classic example is depression. When someone is depressed, firstly, they feel down, they feel sad, right? So that's where the feelings coming. A lot of times they may have some negative thoughts about themselves or the world, and many times their behavior as well. They may not want to engage in things that they normally enjoy. So those are the three major pillars we look at in mental illness. Um, and from there, if you get, I can name any mental illness, and you'll find that there will be some area of deficiency in those specific domains that I would have just mentioned.
Doctor,
So what should the average guy be looking out for? If you want it, people are saying that sometimes we see signs and we're not recognizing them or accepting them. What should the average guy be looking out for?
Okay, great. That's a great question. All right, so generally speaking, when someone has a mental illness, a lot of times one of the earliest signs is some kind of impairment in their ability to function. That can be their ability to function at work, their ability to function at school, their ability to function within the family unit. Um, that's one of the major things that we as clinicians look for when determining the severity of a mental illness. Additionally, you may find that they're no longer engaging in social activity or activities that they once enjoyed. That sometimes can be a very clear marker. And these are just general. These will apply to someone that might have depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, someone who may have a substance abuse issue, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, the list goes on. A lot of times you'll see significant impact on their ability to function, and as well, you'll find that they're less able to engage readily with their community and people around them. Um, in terms of the common illnesses, certainly the ones that are common in Jamaica, like major depressive disorder, for instance, some of the things to look out for would be a significant change in appetite, as the appetite reduce significantly, or sometimes even increase significantly, something that we call emotional eating. Sleep disturbance, do you find that they're sleeping much less or finding it far more difficult to sleep, or that their sleep is frequently interrupted? That can sometimes be another key indicator that this person may be depressed. Is someone experiencing a significant disturbance in their energy? They're always tired, they're always fatigued. Do they have problems concentrating? Do they start to have thoughts of hurting themselves, which of course is a very important discussion that we're having today and on the national forum right now? Do they tend to have a lot of negative thoughts that dominate the way they think? These are some of the common signs and symptoms you see in persons that have major depressive disorder and things that people can look out for. So I'll just reiterate again: a significant change in appetite, sleep, concentration, energy levels, having negative thoughts all the time, sometimes even thoughts of harming themselves. These are some of the key things that we will look for in depression. That's not all the signs and symptoms, but certainly some of the major ones that I would advise that people in general look out for.
All right,
doctor,
doctor,
Doctor.
just before you go on, just before we go on,
Doctor.
doctor, I just want to mention, Desmond is going to ask a question, but I just want to mention a couple of two particular questions. One is on the Facebook pages, sorry, on the YouTube, and she's saying, commenting, I doubt it has anything to do with being content from a science perspective. It's a disease stemming from undeveloped brain from birth. The cures of the triggers, the cures of the triggers that was there from inception, from through the stress from
The cares
inception.
of life, the cares of life trigger the stress
Cares
that
of
was
life.
there from inception.
From inception. And doctor,
So,
can you respond to that? That is, it's nothing about any necessarily about any being content and being stressed.
right.
That you are born like this.
Well, that's a very interesting comment, and I think there's a lot of truth in it. But at the same time, I think we also can try and add a level of precision, especially since we're talking about it from a scientific perspective. So, firstly, regards to being content, what I was stressing was that is the World Health, that's a part of the World Health Organization's definition for mental health, not mental illness. I want to emphasize that there's a difference between mental health and wellness and mental illness. This is a very important distinction that a lot of us health professionals are trying to make sure we put out there. Like if you look at physical health, for instance, you may not be obese, you may not necessarily have high blood pressure, but we would still tell you that in order to have optimal physical health, we want you to exercise 5 times a day. Even if you have no obesity or heart problems, to optimize your health, we want you to exercise 5 times a day, eat a healthy diet. We're not going to wait for you to be obese. It's a very similar approach we have when it comes to mental health now in the modern times. What we talk about is a feeling, and again, quoting the World Health Organization, they describe it as a state of well-being. And a state of well-being is when you do feel content, you do feel satisfied with the circumstances of your life. And we consider that a part of mental health. Oftentimes, when someone has a mental illness, they may struggle, they may find it difficult to actually feel content or satisfied with life. No, in
I
terms of
interrupted
disease, right?
Desmond, doctor, and I don't want him to lose his point. Desmond, go ahead, please.
No, I was asking if the mental illness, what age group in Jamaica I'm talking about, if the mental illness is prevalent amongst what age group, doctor?
Okay, Desmond, excellent question. Let me just finish addressing Ms. Wilson's question quickly. So what I was saying is now that we've established mental health, looking at mental illness or disease, which is the second part of Ms. Wilson's comment, she's correct. Many of the diseases have a genetic or hereditary component, and in many cases, it is due to some kind of issue with an underdeveloped brain, but not always. So when we talk about mental illnesses that are due to underdeveloped brains, we're talking about like neurodevelopmental disorders, for instance, like ADHD. And we do know that with many conditions, there is some kind of issue with the brain from inception that predisposes them to an illness. And then in combination with that, someone who might already be predisposed, when they come across specific stressors, such as adverse childhood events, it can actually trigger a stress response that can then lead to the precipitation of a mental illness. So a lot of what Ms. Wilson is saying has some truth to it. But in terms of the distinction between mental health and mental illness, I think it's very important for our discussion today and to appreciate that even if one doesn't have a mental illness, even if they don't have depression or anxiety, they may still not be content with life, and we wouldn't consider that optimal mental health. Now, on to Mr. Desmond's question, and it's a great question. Thanks for that question, sir. When it comes to the prevalence of mental illnesses across the age groups in Jamaica, we don't necessarily have very robust studies for this. Let me just first start with that. In some first world countries like the United States or in parts of Europe, they have very, very detailed information on this. Not so much in Jamaica, but what I would say is that we understand that mental illness affects people differently across the lifespan. So the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI, commissioned a great study in combination with UNICEF a few years ago. And what they found is that based on some projections, there are high rates of depression and anxiety amongst children in Jamaica. So let's start off with the children first. right? There seems to be high rates of depression and anxiety, though we don't have very precise statistics on this, unfortunately. We just are right now, the robustness of our research on this area is not that high. And what we know is that we do not have presently in our public health system the ability to meet the demand for child and adolescent mental health services. It's a huge gap in our public health system. What we also know is that we have increased rates of substance abuse among adolescents in Jamaica. That's another big one. Now, as we go into young adulthood, we continue to see significant prevalence of depression and anxiety, along with things like substance abuse. And then, in addition to that, we also start to see a significant um, increase in some of the conditions that aren't very common in Jamaica, but are very, very impactful to the health system, such as bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. These represent less than 2% of Jamaica's population, but they generally are as someone who has worked in public hospitals for many years now, I can tell you that if you visit a public psychiatric hospital, you will find that the majority of the burden for staff is to treat people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And we generally see these in the early adulthood or late adolescent period. And then more or less, we continue to see high rates of, or the conditions you see most frequently in middle adulthood. So let's say from your mid-20s to your 40s, 50s, continues to be depression and anxiety, guys. And that's the case in most populations. And then finally, and this is very important, because Jamaica is an aging population, we have a higher proportion of our population is now elderly, and we're having less children than we've ever had. So because of that, we know that among the older adults in Jamaica over 65, there's an increased risk for dementia, in particular dementia caused by Alzheimer's disease. So to answer your question in short, Mr. Desmond, mental illness, certainly in Jamaica and in other parts of the world, affects people across the entire lifespan. And depending on where you are across the lifespan, some conditions are more common than others. The last thing I'll mention, just because, again, suicide is such a relevant topic right now in the national discourse, is that when it comes to suicide, it's very clear that one, we have far greater numbers of completed suicides done by men. The ratio appears to be 8-1. So men complete suicide 8 times more frequently than women. So that's a huge discrepancy. And secondly, amongst men, it tends to be more frequently middle-aged men that complete suicide. But there was a study that was done by, I want to say, the World Health Organization in combination with UNICEF some years back that showed that almost 1 in 5 adolescents in Jamaica would have had thoughts of hurting themselves. So not completing suicide, absolutely not, but would have had thoughts of hurting themselves, about 1 in 5. So that's just another thing I wanted to emphasize, guys.
Good.
Thank
So,
you,
Doc,
Doctor. Winnie, we're going to
Yes,
come to you after Desmond.
yes.
After you, Desmond, we're going to take you again. But I just want to mention, um, Doctor, that we have a few questions. I have some on my WhatsApp as well. But Winnie, you go ahead, please.
Yes, with the 3.3 illness, thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Because thoughts, that's for the individual, feelings for the individual as well. Behavior, could you spell out? I could say some, but could you spell out the kinds of behaviors that would be observed that we need to pay attention to or be alert about and seek help for this individual because they don't usually seek help themselves?
That's a really insightful question, ma'am. Thank you for bringing it forward.
May I
So,
say that's born from experience?
okay, I got you. So
Yes,
when we talk,
I have a sister who had manic depression.
okay, I got you. So,
Yes.
when we speak of behavior, we're talking about any kind of outward action that persons are taking. So we really mean behavior in the broad sense of the word. And again, I'm going to emphasize some of the things I would have mentioned before first. Some of the key things to look out for. For instance, if someone's depressed, do you find that they are no longer engaging in social activity? They're no longer going out as much as they used to. For persons who are anxious, they may stay inside all the time because they are afraid or have apprehension about things that are going outside. They may have some fears. Certainly for someone who has a phobia, if you have a phobia for spiders, for instance, you may not go anywhere you suspect a spider might be. You might avoid it entirely. Um, Now, when it comes to a condition, a psychotic disorder like schizophrenia, this is when we call what we call grossly disorganized behavior. In Jamaica, when people say quote unquote "you're behaving like a madman," though we no longer like to use that language, let me emphasize that. But that's when you might hear reports of people eating from garbage, people just taking off their clothes abruptly, and doing all sorts of things that are difficult to understand. So that's kind of the disorganized behavior we see in the context of schizophrenia. Now, when we think of children, for instance, I think those of us in the health and education sector do appreciate that there is a significant um, prevalence of ADHD among some of our children. It seems to be kind of underrepresented, or maybe not given as much attention. Kids with ADHD um, may sometimes display hyperactivity. They might be very restless. They may not be able to settle or sit down in one space. They may be very chatty. They may be quick to interrupt in class. A lot of times in our culture, we would just label them bad behaving picnic. But I think now in 2025, we're starting to appreciate that this actually can be a part of a bigger mental illness. Um, and I could go on and on. These are just some examples of some of the behaviors to look for, guys, but there are many, and it depends on the condition. I mean, finally, because I never want to leave our older adults out of the discussion.
Please.
Of course, if someone starts misplacing items, starts repeating themselves frequently, gets lost at home, those sometimes can be the earliest behavioral signs of dementia.
Okay.
Yes,
Desmond, back to you.
yes, yes, Doc, I was you mentioned that men um, the rate of suicide is more prevalent among men. Now, is there any? Are you able to say if there are any reasons why in Jamaica men are more commit suicide more frequent than women?
Right.
Complete.
So that's complete, right? Thank you.
Complete
So,
is the operative word because I think so many women try.
Mm,
right. So, again, Miss Anderson Brown is dropping some facts. The reality is that um, women are actually more likely to attempt suicide than men in most societies. However, men are the ones that are more likely to complete it. So that is an important distinction for us to make. And I want to emphasize that again, women actually attempt suicide in higher frequency than men. But in
Right.
terms of completing suicide, men are more likely than women in any society. That's not unique to Jamaica. There are very, very few societies where these are not the case. These are general trends that are observed globally. Now, in terms of for our local context, it's already concerning that men complete suicide more consistently than women. But what is particularly um, bothersome is that men do it at a rate of 8 to 1, which is much higher. In most parts of the world, it's about 2 to 1. In Jamaica, it's 8 to 1. So that speaks to a huge discrepancy. Um, Again, I will emphasize we don't necessarily have very detailed studies on exactly why this is the case. But I think for a lot of us who work in this sphere, there are observations that we've made, and I'll, comment on those right now. Firstly, the reality is that men are not socialized to open up about their emotions. From a very young age, men are told not to cry, they're told they have to man up, and they're told they can't be sissies and things like that. And that does not encourage men to feel they have a safe space to talk
Yes.
about issues. And when you bottle up issues like that and not find an outlet for it, it's more likely to result in negative outcomes such as completing suicide. Not just that alone, as you know, in Jamaica, we always say that you can almost any corner in Jamaica, you can find a bar. And in almost any bar in Jamaica, you find mostly men. Most of the time, maybe sometimes the only woman there is the bartendress. That is where a lot of men go for their outlet because they don't feel they can openly speak about it. There's a stigma towards mental health in general or mental illnesses in general in Jamaica, but it's even more so for men. I can tell you that when I see patients privately, the majority of patients I see are women because women will acknowledge that they're going through something and seek professional care. For men, it's much less likely. That's just the reality of it. Men try and find other outlets, sometimes less healthy outlets like substance abuse, for instance. So from as far as I'm concerned, I think that's a huge part of why we see that huge discrepancy in the frequency of completed suicides. And the only solution really is for us to try and make the changes in society so that men can now feel more comfortable being open about their struggles and their emotions. And then hopefully with that,
Doctor, two
be able to
times,
find more positive ways of dealing with it. Thank you.
Doctor, two times since you've been speaking, you mentioned a lack of statistics in Jamaica. One of our viewers, Emma Lewis, is asking, why don't we have good statistics? And she's also asking, what can family and those close to a person do to help and support that person once they have recognized something is amiss? So the
Okay, no
stats
problem.
question, if you will, first. Why don't we have better stats on suicide? Mental health
All
illness
right.
generally. Sorry.
Really excellent question, guys. The reality is Jamaica doesn't have a lot of good statistics in many areas. It's not just mental health. And as a doctor, I can tell you, in general, our health statistics are not up to a certain standard. So this is not unique to mental health. Mental health is just one of many areas in which Jamaica doesn't have the most robust statistics. And if you want to know the reason, it's pretty straightforward. For one, Jamaica has a significant brain drain issue. That's one thing that people always have to remember. A lot of our brightest and best talents leave Jamaica. And so we don't necessarily have the manpower. As some of you may remember, when we we're supposed to do our census, which is a form of statistics, it's one of the most important statistics in Jamaica. Everyone was sick. They were crying out for people to come and help, but people weren't interested in doing the census or being a part of the working staff to create the census. And that's just the reality. We don't have the manpower. If we're going to be able to amass good statistics on health issues, such as mental health, you're going to need a huge manpower behind it. In the US, because they have a huger population that's more significantly educated than ours, and because they've put over many decades, they've put together institutions like the CDC, and they have the framework for it. They are able to compile statistics. There are many other reasons, but just to answer your question, Emma Lewis, in less than a minute, that's why. What can families and those close to a person do to support? So I always tell persons that your first line of defense when dealing with mental illnesses or mental issues is family and friends, guys. The
Yes.
majority of
Yes.
mental issues can be successfully handled with family and friends. The majority of mental health issues do not require medical intervention. I'll emphasize that. So what you can do as a family unit is listen, show them that you care, validate the way they feel, and be as
Yes.
supportive as possible. I
Yes.
think I'm not going to go too much into this, guys. I'm not going to go too much in a tangent, but I always stress to people that the breakdown of community and family structures in Jamaica is a huge contributor to the burden of mental illness in Jamaica. One of the best ways we can improve mental illness in Jamaica would be to find ways to strengthen our sense of community and our family structures in Jamaica. That would go a huge way into improving mental illness or mental health in Jamaica. So those are what you can do as a family. There's a lot that family and those close can do. Listen, be there, support. Sometimes um, the family may be unable to, maybe the issue is too severe for them. In situations like that, it is appropriate to encourage them to take professional care. So there's definitely a role for professional care. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But before you get to that, try and be the listening ear, try and be the supportive arm around them. A lot of times that will resolve a lot of issues. I like Carlene's question. Sorry, because she sent me another question. Um, So, all right, let me first touch on Carlene's comment. She said pay was the reason. I agree with you, Carlene. Pay was a major reason why.
Or the
That's the
census.
major
She's
reason
talking
people
about the
citing.
census.
Yeah, man, I know, and I'm going to
It's
address
when
that. So,
when you go there, another reason the seasoned people in the census, they didn't want them. So we won't
so,
touch the census business because too many
but
issues are wrapped up in that census story.
But I agree with you. But the one thing I want to say before I go to her question, which was very interesting, is that the pay is the same problem with the manpower, Pay and manpower are the same thing because that's why we have the brain
Yes,
drain. People leave
yes.
Jamaica because they want better pay. So you can't, I'm not going to separate those issues, Carlene. For me, we have manpower problems because we have pay problems. So I'm agreeing with you. It's the same
I
reason
have
why we
this
don't
one,
have statistics for other things.
Doctor.
And then now
I
Carlene
have
has
this one
another
on my.
question.
I have
Yeah,
this one on
I see.
my WhatsApp, so I beg you to deal with this one.
All right, no
This one
problem.
person is asking, how can you help when the family members are going to say they are not sick, they are not mentally sick? How can you help when they are saying we are not mentally sick? They are
That's a
You
not
very
tell
admitting to
practical
them
the
that they
issue.
question.
are.
That's a very practical question, and that's a question that a lot of us come across all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, man, in the hospital setting, in the clinic setting, I can tell you, we see it all the time, man, where family members will say that it's not a mental illness, maybe a spiritual attack, and things like that. Um, what I always stress, you're not always going to be able to convince people, if they hold strongly held beliefs. If they may just hold on to the idea that it's not a mental illness, and no matter how much statistics, science, whatever you want to bring to them, they just may not budge. My advice in a situation like that is to say, well, call it what you want. This person is struggling. This person's having a hard time. This person is in distress. Those are things that all of us can appreciate, whether we want to call it a mental illness or not. Start from there. I always say, meet people where they're at. So they might not, if you said depression, for instance, they might say, what are you talking about? No, man, people have an idea of what depression is, and sometimes when you tell them that, oh, this person's depressed, they say, no, sir, he's not depressed. He don't know one name depression. We hear that all the time. Rather than focus on the label, make the focus more on the fact that this person is distressed. This person is experiencing some degree of struggle or suffering, and we need to find a way to help them as a family member out of it, regardless
May
of
I
what we
ask
want to call it.
a related question to that, doctor? Is
Mm-hmm.
this sometimes a person who is mentally ill turns against family members and you can't go near that person becomes very abusive, and it's challenging for the family members who want to help because sometimes they turn against family members, attack physically, abuse verbally. How do you deal with that?
It's a very challenging thing to have to deal with, and especially if we start going into the area of violence or physical
Yes.
aggression, at that point, I would advise anyone to ensure that they're safe and to probably try and utilize some of our community mental health services, the police, etc. Because when someone is exhibiting violence and aggression due to their mental illness, it can be unpredictable in a way that someone who doesn't have a mental illness wouldn't be. So the first advice I'd give you is to just secure your own physical safety in a scenario like that, and see if you can reach out to the appropriate authorities to assist in a situation. Now,
Doctor,
aside from that, um, the next bit of advice I would give generally is to to try and get professional care as quickly as possible, because when someone is experiencing an acute episode of a mental illness, which alters their behavior or personality, um, this is an issue that can be remedied with the appropriate treatment, and you can get them back to baseline. But the earlier you intervene, the better. So don't just watch it. Don't sit down and just watch it. You realize all of a sudden John is speaking and acting in ways that he normally wouldn't. Try and get some professional help as quickly as possible. So the two biggest things, secure your own personal safety, first and foremost, and then try and get professional help. Once it goes into the realm of someone being abusive and angry or aggressive when they normally are not, yeah, man, at that point in time, that's when I would recommend seeking some kind of professional assistance.
Doc,
Um,
Doc, one of my
Desmond?
experiences, yes, Doc, one of my experiences this that on the road, um, most street people are referred to as madman that, madman that.
right,
No,
right, right.
yes, is there? I would like you to clarify for me that the street people that we see, and many of them are around on the road, that are they suffering from mental illness? How do we know?
So that's a great question. The reality is that in most um, populations, and certainly Jamaica, the majority of persons who are homeless are not persons with a diagnosed mental illness. And that's a very important distinction. It's an
Yes.
unfortunate stigma. People think that when you're homeless, you have a mental illness. That's not the truth, right? There is a significant proportion of homeless people who do have mental illness. I'm not saying that isn't the case, but the majority of people who are homeless do not have a diagnosed mental illness. And that's a very, very important distinction that we need to get to as a society.
Right.
Okay.
Doctor, we're going to be wrapping up now, but I just had to
Sure.
ask you this one. Um,
I have a question I
how
want
do
to
you
answer to before I
feel?
leave.
Oh,
No.
Yeah, let me take care
sorry.
of
See
this
if
one and
you
I'll take your
go
last
ahead and
question.
finish, doctor, and then I come to you this
Yeah,
one. I'm
man.
sorry.
So yeah, man. So Caroline Smith. Um, and I see, all right, I see one from Caroline Smith. I see one from Emma Lewis. It's just because these are very interesting questions and comments. I really want to address them. You have a very good audience today, guys. Um, so Caroline says, considering the stresses of life, has mankind ever had optimal mental health? What is the mental health target? Great question. So guess what? They do this thing called the happiness index. It's an annual
Oh, yeah.
index on which countries are
Yes.
the happiest in the world. And
Yeah.
generally, Carleen, you'll find that the Scandinavian countries like Finland, Norway, etc., they're usually topping it, right? Not the United
Yeah.
States, usually it's those countries. And why is it that those countries have such high rates of being happy and relatively low rates of mental illness? It's because they have a very strong sense of community, for one. They have excellent social services. So no matter how much money you have or how little money you have, you're going to have access to good education, you're going to have access to good healthcare. So people feel safe and secure in any society. It is the, generally speaking, it's the most depraved or the persons with the least resources that are struggling and suffering that take up a good proportion of why persons experience mental illness. So what that emphasizes is that there are societal things that we can do to improve mental health on a national level. So it's in terms of um, has mankind ever had optimal mental health? It's an interesting question. What I would say is our mental health target should be to have a greater proportion of Jamaicans, again, I'm going to use the word, being content and happy with life. And that is what we found when we do the happiness index, that there are some countries where they have very strong social services, very strong social networks, very strong social, what do you call it? Safety nets, sorry, where all members of society at least have a baseline level of quality of life. And that is what we should be looking for. So I always stress, I'm a psychiatrist myself. But if we want to see an improvement in Jamaica's mental health, we're going to take more than the doctors and more than the psychologists, etc. It's going to take all of us as a society making decisions so that even the poorest Jamaican has access to certain resources. And then finally, I do want to talk about what Emma Lewis said. She said professional help is often the only way. I know this from my personal experience. What I'll say to Emma is, I've treated thousands of persons in hospital settings and clinic settings, and I've talked to many people, right? I am a professional, I'm a mental health professional myself. There's a huge need, and I emphasized already that we don't even have the demand for mental health services in Jamaica is not met by the supply. We need more mental health professionals. So in no way am I suggesting that there isn't a need for professional help. There absolutely is. However, I'm going to emphasize this again. The majority of mental health challenges, not even mental illness, by the way, the majority of mental health challenges are not of the severity that require hospital admission or even attending the clinic if we catch them early and if we have very strong family and community structures in place. That's the point I'm making. And what I would tell you is that if you look at a significant case like the one that Miss Anderson Brown brought up, cases like bipolar, schizophrenia. No, those conditions generally require professional assistance. And I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about persons who might be experiencing some kind of psychological distress due to a stressor in their life or problems. A lot of times, if they had a good support network around them, they would be able to resolve those issues effectively without the need for professional help. And that's what we see in countries like Finland and Norway, etc. So that was the point I was making there. And yes, Mr. McKnight, sorry, taking over your show. I think you have one more question for me.
Well, Dr. Kazaara, I want to thank you very much, Dr. Brian Kazaara, who is the president of the Psychiatric Association, Jamaica Psychiatric Association. We're sure we're going to have to come back to you, doctor, because we have I have several issues here, and you have been taking on some of the issues that people have raised. But I have several issues, so I'm going to beg you to promise us that when we reach out to you again, you will help us out, because we really want to take on. There are many aspects of mental health, mental wellness, mental illness that we haven't touched, and we are you for today.
Franklin, before he goes, it's important, I think, that people don't get the impression that mental illness knows any class. Mental illness knows no class. It happens right across.
Absolutely. 100% agreed.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, guys.
So thanks again, Dr. Kazaara, and we'll be in touch with you, sir. Hoping that you'll be able to help us out again one of these afternoons.
Of course. All right. Bye, guys. Thank you again.
Bye. And thank you
now
so
we
much.
want to go over to... Thank you, sir. We want to go over now to Leighton Campbell. Mr. Campbell is president of the Jamaica Association of Guidance Counselors in Schools. Mr. Campbell, is that correct?
Good
Is he with us yet?
McKnight, I'm right here. Yes, that is.
Yes,
we should have
just
Mr.
not
Campbell
on.
with us now. And that was very interesting.
In education, not
Mr.
school.
Campbell, be with us now. And we want to talk, we want to explore some of the practical aspects of what Dr. Kazaara was speaking about in the schools, in the school situation, schoolroom situation, and what guidance counselors can or cannot do. Mr. Campbell, are you with us now? Are you hearing me?
He made a correction, Mr. McKnight, that needs to be made. He said in education, not schools.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Campbell.
Yes, that's.
Mr. Campbell, we're hearing you now.
I am hearing you. Are you hearing me? Good afternoon.
We're hearing you.
Right, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. First thing, yes, thank you, and welcome to you. I'm sorry we have been into a bit of your time, but Mr. Campbell, tell us, are guidance counselors equipped to handle the issues that are coming up with regard to mental health, mental wellness, mental illness in schools? I wonder if we can start there.
All right, thank you for that question, Mr. McKnight. I'm going to say,
Mr. Campbell,
as Dr. Kazaara would have ended, just know that not all mental health issues are challenges that the counselors are equipped to deal with. In fact, within the remit of what we do, we are sent, and where that is concerned, we do make referral to our partners in the Ministry of Education or with the Ministry of Health. But generally speaking, guidance counselors are trained professionals in our field.
are we hearing Mr. Campbell well? I'm having a difficult.
Yes, we're hearing him, Franklin. Maybe
Yeah,
it's
Mr.
you.
Campbell, Mr. Campbell, go ahead, man. I'm hearing
Continue, please, Mr. Campbell.
Okay, thank you. I will do. So,
Yes, please continue.
guidance counselors, we are trained professionals, and they are constant upgrading professional development that takes place over the duration of any counselor's tenure in the profession. As an association, every year we host at least 2 national conferences which focuses on upskilling counselors in the association in terms of delivering the services and practices within the schools. So the association does that at the national level. And at the regional level, because we also have regional associations, the regional associations also plan some professional development for the members in their regions. And in addition to that, the Ministry of Education does provide ongoing training for counselors. So in short, response to that question, counselors are prepared to deal with most of the mental health challenges that are presented within the education system. I will say not all, because there are some cases that referrals must be made.
But
Okay.
do you have enough mental health professionals to address these issues?
Thank you for that question. Again, no. One of the things that I reflect on 2021 Capri research, which was also quoted by the Observer, I think in 2023, making mention of the fact that, the human resource within the mental health profession is way inadequate to meet the demand. So we know for most of the students that we may refer them to the child guidance clinic. Now, for example, in one locality, the doctors may not come to that institution or that health center every day or every week. They may come every other week. That's one. And in some areas, we know we have the CPFSA, who also referrals are made too. They too on professionals to deliver the kind of help that is needed. In recent times, the ministry now pays private practitioners to deal with some of the cases with students and some staff as well. But again, we also know that within that profession, there's not enough. So really and truly, there is not enough health professionals to deal, mental health professionals to deal with the number of cases that are presented on a weekly basis.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Campbell. Until Mr. McKnight is able to get back, I'm asking you, can you comment specifically on the recent cases of suicide in schools, the 2 cases?
So there should be 3. I think there are 3. There was one in July, earlier up in July, and there were 2 that were reported in September. So
Okay.
since July to now, there are 3 that were reported as death by suicide in schools. Now, it is unfortunate and really saddening,
Sad.
and I want to say that for me as a parent, I parent 3 young men. The youngest is 16, the eldest is 20, and all of them are studying. And so I know that students come under enormous amount of pressure from the wider society, from home, and not only that. In fact, 2 of the cases we have heard that these students were being bullied, and so the magnitude of that which they had to deal with, and apparently no safe space, as it were. It appears that there was no safe space for them to have an outlet to share what was happening, and so they resorted to that. So we do know that a number of our young people are faced with challenges like those and to escape the pain, because that's what it really is. And I do believe if they had a better idea how they could have escaped the pain at that moment, they would have opted for that other option. And so really and truly, a number of our young people want to find that other escape, but it's somewhat seemingly to be eluding them. I also want to add that I do believe that we are not listening long enough. And for those of us who are hearing, sometimes we are not interpreting what is being said, or again, we take some things for granted that this may be what is happening. And we just feel that they can't get over it. And as adults, sometimes I tell you, one of the comments I've heard, but they're not facing anything. We face a whole lot of these things and we manage, and this generation is not as resilient as they appear. But the truth be told, every generation has its own challenges. And
Yes.
there are some things that I believe as an adult I would not be able to manage if I were living in this generation without the help of trusted adults and other individuals. So much of this is taking place with our students.
Do you
So-
find
Mr. Campbell, you mentioned.
Oh, Mr. McKnight is back. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Desmond. Go ahead.
I am asking Mr.
Go ahead,
Campbell, do you find that mental health issues are common among students these days?
I would say yes. One of the things that we keep hearing, or as a guidance counselor, one of the things that I hear ever so often, boy, me stress out, me can't bother, life just hard, boy, me not understand, me just not know what to do. I do believe that it is very common among our young people, and like doctor said earlier, we're not diagnosing anybody, but there are challenges. There are a whole lot of mental health challenges among our teenagers. One has to bear in mind that this generation is exposed to everything. The social media and the internet has opened our children to just about anything, everywhere, anytime. And so they contend with a lot of things out there, and it makes it difficult for them to even process some things. I also equally want to add, so for example, as a parent with three males in my house, as a father, sometimes parents heap some kind of unwanted pressure on the child or the children, making the comparison to say this one is like that and that one's like that. And then because each child is different, one child may absorb it and internalize the information and internalize the comments and will not want to talk out, and so it affects them in that way. There are so many issues that come to this, and so just go back to answer the question. Yes, a lot of our students today are faced with mental health challenges, more than we can ever imagine.
May we take a question from Emma Lewis now? It says, how prevalent is bullying in schools? Any statistics there would point that every generation has its challenges. Back to you.
Okay, so as it relates to bullying in school, while I do not have the current stats, I know that a couple of years back in 2022, there was a research that was done which says approximately 40% of our students face bullying in school. So it is high. So while I don't have the current one, I still think it's along that line. And so it's very, very common. It is very, very common in schools, especially when the child is just entering the school, or if the child is there for a while and the person think that this person is a weakling, then they will prey on this child. So it is very, very prevalent in schools, and truth be told, a number of students do not talk about it. They do not talk about it for one reason or the other, and so there may not even be a true reflection of what really takes place, but it is prevalent.
Thank you. You want to come in, Franklin? Are you able to hear us?
Yes, I've been having some internet problems, as you know, but I just wanted to ask Mr. Campbell. Mr. Campbell, how do you manage, the guidance counselors manage, where there's one guidance counselor serving 2 or 3 schools? How does that go, and what's the solution for that? One guidance counselor serving 2 or 3 small schools. What's the solution for that?
Thank you for that question, Mr. McKnight. This is one of the things that the association has spoken about. Certainly, I have spoken about it last year on another radio program. The immediate past president spoke about it earlier this year. I had a conversation with a ministry official where this is concerned. How those counselors manage, because I have not been in that situation, but how do they manage? It is absolutely impractical. To be honest, I don't think they are managing. I know the argument from ministry is that because these schools are small and the numbers doesn't add up or do not add up to the 500 per ratio to 1. One of the things I also observe, and I can't agree that one counselor should be serving 2, 3 schools, because for these same schools, each of these schools has a principal. There's not one principal that principal the clusters of schools, and so I think the very same way that each school needs a principal, each school needs a guidance counselor, and so I honestly don't think the counselors are effectively doing their duties as they would want to in a situation like that. Think about it, Mr. Franklin. One counselor to 3 schools. That means 2 schools stand a chance of seeing that counselor twice for the week, but the other 3 will only see that counselor 1 time for that week. So it's difficult. What I do know how some counselors manage, they tend to be like somewhat on call. So if they go to this school today, but there's a need at the other school, with time and distance, they may reach over, or they'll have someone to get the information, and then later on they will reach out to the student or the parent, or sometimes even a staff member. But it's absolutely impractical for them to be effective in this manner.
You there, Franklin? Are you there, Franklin? Okay.
No, Franklin is not.
Okay, we are at the end of our show. We just have those are persons who have commented. Thank you very much for all that you have done. Thanks to our guests, and thanks to all those who participated today. Thanks to Franklin McKnight, who had challenges today, and Desmond. This is Winnie Anderson Brown saying until next time, have a good afternoon. Those who didn't watch live, you may watch anytime. Just click. Bye for now.